Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. My name is Debbie and I'm a mixed media artist, and I love working in my sketchbooks, which is exactly what I'm going to do today. And it's kind of a comparison today because as a mixed media artist I use all sorts of substrates and all sorts of bits and pieces over the top of the substrates to build a picture. For example, this little guy here, he's mainly watercolor, but I was very bored with that bit, so I put some flowers in using everything else I get my hands on. There's colored pencil in there, there's ink, there's absolutely everything. And that's what I love about mixed media, is if you're bored with something and just when you think something's finished, you think, oh, you know, it's a bit meh. No, go back in and find something else. Use a felt tip marker, use some acrylic paint, throw something else at it. It's absolutely amazing. Cannot recommend it enough. Before we get into today's comparison, some housekeeping, of course. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe and a comment if you have the time. I try to get back to all of them. It's a little bit difficult at the moment because we're moving house, but I'm still trying to do absolutely my best for you. So, yeah, I feel if you take the time to comment, I'd like to take the time to at least acknowledge it. So yeah, but bear with me. Also, if you like what you see today and you find this sort of work exciting, something that you might like doing, do consider joining my Patreon, which is all of the information is in the description box below. And I treat my Patreon like an art school actually, and I do actual lessons, sort of nothing sped up while music plays, but I tell you exactly what I'm doing at absolutely every stage, and it's all in English. So if that is your chosen language, that is what my Patreon's in. Right, getting back on with it. I want to do today a simple comparison between two sorts of substrate. Now, the substrate refers to the underlayer, basically the first layer we put down on the, in this case, rather grubby page. Two of my favourite substrates are watercolour and gouache, and those are the two that I'm going to compare and contrast today. And I'm going to do exactly the same sketch. What I'm going to do is draw two little panels. Start with, that's about halfway. So we'll start off with two little panels, and I'm going to do exactly the same sketch on both using different substrate, but the same things over the top. And I'm thinking that a little one, say with the C in it, I'm thinking St. Michael's Mount, that sort of thing. So just making a very rough sketch here. And some small details, that sort of thing, just very vague sort of stuff. We might have something there, maybe we'd have a little island here. Half of this is made up. Like I said, do bear with me. Let's see if we can get it almost the same. I can't, my career as a forger is sunk before I start. I can't even copy my own work, and I've only just done that bit. So we're going to make it nice and vague and loose and so forth like that. But above all, we're going to do the same-ish thing on both. Now, the first thing is like I said, I'm a mixed media artist, so I don't necessarily do the sky with the paint that I'm going to use. So what I do the sky with that I like most is pan pastel. And here's me, should have actually found the pan pastel before I started. So I think I'm going to go and have a look for that and sit rather than rattling around in a drawer for 20 minutes, and I shall come back to you. Just about to call the local constabulary thinking that I had been robbed because I couldn't see my pan pastel, but then I realised I had put it in another box in order to do some, it's all ready for a tutorial for my Patreon, and I thought I'm going to be really organised for the first time in my life and put everything in a box ready to go. And of course that's just too much for me, I'm afraid. Right, so I've got a little sponge here, and the first thing I do with the pan pastel is to make a sky and maybe leave some clouds. This is not going to be the same. There's just no way I can get this the same. And it doesn't need to be fair. We just need to get a bit of a sky and make sure that the clouds aren't square, because they're not as a rule. I've never seen them. And a bit of violet in that one as well. And again, because I'm a mixed media artist, I don't use anything properly, here air quotes there, so I don't use my pan pastels properly. I don't use anything else properly either. So I've got a little makeup sponge which I use again and again and again and then wash out, and that's how I do my skies, which is nice and quick, nice and sky-like, and it makes me happy to see it. So that's what we're after. Right, the next thing now is one of these will be watercolour and the other one will be gouache. So let's start with the watercolour one first. You need a round brush and you need some paint. I like this glacier green. You watch, I'll forget and do it in both sides because really a little bit too much there. These are super granulating watercolours, and sadly you've got to allow them enough room to swim. They've got to have enough room and enough water to swim in, and if you don't do it, they won't do their job. Partly the reason I don't use a lot more watercolour is because I tend to, with my art practice as a rule, I'll tend to cover it all up again with other subsequent layers, which is a real pity because, you know, you've got this situation where you could have an absolutely beautiful effect, and then I've put felt tip, acrylic and colour pencil, Neocolor, oil pastels, whatever, you name your poison, and I put it over the top. So it's sort of, it doesn't really allow the watercolour to shine, which is a real pity. Right, the next thing we need is a bit of a brown colour. Now, I'm using Schminke super granulating watercolours here, and as you may or may not know, the other thing they quite like, got a bit of a causeway coming out here, is they like to be woken up a little bit. So put water on them before you start using them and give them a chance to sort of wake up and smell the coffee sort of thing. Like I said, doing a lot looser sort of effect here than I normally do. And for my patrons who see this on pre-release, I will put a full list of what I'm using in your description box there so you can see it. I'm presuming that the colour is going to be lighter this side because the light in my pictures nearly always comes from this side. So that's that one. Drop that on there. I need a nice darkish green. I'm not sure I'm going to get it though. Let's just go with this one here, which is a forest grey actually, but it might count. Yeah, no, that counts as green and it's dark enough. Again, I don't use the watercolour properly really. I tend to use gouache too thin and watercolour too thick, but the results, we get them. Okay, so then just a little bit of a blot for that to give it some texture. Move it around a little bit more, because the great thing about mixed media is I've got the option of coming back in with other things, and in this setting other things means coloured pencils and things like that, so I don't have to do everything in the one fell swoop. Let's get those rocks in a bit and a bit more here. This is not accurate. I don't expect you to be able to pop this into TripAdvisor and have your AI on your phone say, oh, that's St Michael's Mount in Cornwall. I might try it later and see what it actually does do, see where it takes me. I might get lucky with it. Right, so bits and bobs. Want a bit more variation in that green there in the middle, but not too much required. Right, and finally for this bit, we will do some sand. It's a reasonable sand colour, I suppose. Yeah, that'll do. Again, it's only the first layer because I've got the option of other things which will go in a second. Right, so that's pretty much the watercolour side. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to swap and find my gouache pan, and then we'll do this similar thing That's the best I can hope for, is a similar thing on the other side. And then we'll put the coloured pencils and other things over the top and see how they feel differently. Quite often, depending on what you use, it really does add another layer of tooth to the paper, which is what you need for the subsequent layers. So for example, if you're using coloured pencil and so forth, there's only so many layers of pure coloured pencil you can get on paper, especially this smooth one. I'm using a Hmmm Nostalgia sketchbook, which has lovely smooth paper. It's probably better suited to drawing than painting, but it will accept a lot of wet media actually, and I'm always very, very happy with it because of that. But there's a limit to anything that you can use with it because it's smoother, but you need the smooth paper to get the nice fine strokes with coloured pencil. For example, if you use watercolour on the watercolour paper that Hmmm has, or anybody else, your pencil will skip across the high points of especially cold pressed paper where it's really, really rough. You can't get the fine detail the way you would like to. You can if you really put your back into it and basically squash the paper down, but that just seems like such a pity really when you're using that paper for the texture. So I tend to use this finer grain paper, and this is lovely and smooth. It's almost like cartridge paper to draw on and paint on, which is great for the pan pastel. It's great for watercolor. It'll still do its thing. It's great for gouache. It'll do its thing. And above all, I can pile other things on top. But the addition of the paint also helps to add to the amount of things that I can put on it subsequently, because there's always a limit. But the good thing about mixed media is when you reach the limit with one particular medium, you can go on to something else. So for example, like I said, there's a limit to how many layers of coloured pencil you can put on, especially with some of the waxy and oily ones. But when you've absolutely exhausted it and the paper's just saying, no, I'm sorry, I'm not taking not another gram of colour, then you can swap. So you might swap to an oil pastel and pile it up again. And that's the great thing about it. Right, I'm going to dry this and I'm going to get my gouache and we're going to come in and have another go with gouache. I'll see you very shortly. Right, so now I've got my famously messy gouache palette out. We'll do exactly the same thing again. Oh gosh, my dog waited. She's pretty convinced there's somebody there. Let's just see if she calms down. So I do apologise about the noises in the background. No, we're not going to, I don't think. Anyway, I've done the pan pastel sky already. So the next thing now is to go in with a sort of a tan colour, and I've no idea. Again, I apologise if you're looking at this on... if you're one of my students, because I normally put up what I use in a picture so that you sort of have a fighting chance of knowing what that is. But I don't know what it is in this palette, but I will make some educated guesses anyway. Right, so just a little bit here in the front, same. Bump the book, that's absolutely necessary. I do that all the time. It really, really annoys me. Okay, green. This is a mixture of the darkest blue, darkest brown and darkest green all together, which makes a really nice, very earthy sort of green. And as you can see, as I said, I don't use this the way you're supposed to. I've got it watered down quite a bit actually. A bit too much blue in that one. And we've got the causeway, that can be in green even though it isn't. I keep wanting to come back to this other one and touch stuff up and do things to it, but I can't, because to make a fair fight of this, it's going to have to be done properly. So we can put some lighter colours in there. Totally different to the other one, of course. Love the fact with gouache that you can reactivate it if it's not quite right, or you want to mute it down or get it to sort of marry together nicely. And I never worry about making mud. Mud is the goal, in fact, in some cases. Right, now something for the sea. Better be bluish, I suppose. A bit of blue and a bit of white and a bit of a turquoisey colour. A totally different feel to this other one, that's for sure. But I like the fact that I can use gouache very, very similar to watercolour, and for ages used nothing else. And because I'm going to cover it up, it just seems such a shame when you've got a really nice super granulating effect from a watercolour and then I pile all of the other colours on top. So yeah, I've had to fight quite hard against that. That's very, very bright, isn't it? I'm a muted coloured person, as my regulars amongst you will know by now. I really do value muted colours. Not sure if that rocks there in real life either. It is somewhere there. But like I said, we're not going to leave a horrible comment on TripAdvisor if it can't find wherever the hell this is. Oh gosh, that is bizarrely and alarmingly blue. And it's not going to go away very easy either. It's okay, we'll pretend we wanted it and add a bit more. It's one of my main defences, is to pretend I was going for that all along. And finally, a little bit of a sandy colour. Not too dissimilar from the watercolour. Right, now the idea here is, now that I've gotten this bit out the way, I can go on to use the same layers over the top now. And so what I do on one side I can do on the other, and I don't have to remember where it is I'm up to. So shut that up and give this a dry. I'm using my Heat It tool by Ranger, which I use for my card making actually. Hairdryer is good too, anything that dries it quite quickly, because above all, and I always dry the back, you'd be amazed how much water gets into the actual paper. And of course, when it wants to evaporate, it's going to evaporate through the broadest possible surface, which is the top of the paper, which means that something that you thought was dry isn't. And the only way to really tell if it's dry is if it feels warm to the touch, or even quite hot, then it is dry. If it feels cool or if it has cool spots, it is not dry. And your subsequent layers will not work very well at all. And by that I mean coloured pencils do not like it. Felt tip, some felt tip fine liners, you'll ruin them completely. Pigma Micron, I'm looking at you, love their excellent products, but any hint of moisture and then it's game over. Right, I'm trying to find my favourites here, and you can tell they're my favourites because they're tiny. Let's go in with green first, and this is Forest by Derwent Lightfast. And what I'm going to do now is to just put a little bit of interest. There's a tree on this side, so we can put that on both. Maybe if I do it both sides simultaneously, it will happen. So what I'm doing is just scribbling in. Like I said, normally I'm all about the details and tight painting, but for this I thought, no, actually what I would like to do here is a nice representative sort of looser, as everybody's talking about all the time. I'm not into that trend. I just don't see the point. I like details, don't want to do it looser, but sometimes you can do a sketchy sort of thing. So that's the forest, and then I'm going to come in with Caran d'Ache Green Ochre and add some highlights to the sunny side here. Now, so far, the report back, because we are meant to be doing a comparison here, it feels very, very similar. The same amount of tooth. The watercolour is really lovely to work on, so is the gouache. Gouache is a bit richer in colour. This is much, much brighter. I think I can see where the trend is going to go with this as well. And that is that not one, but both will be suitable and in different places. So it'll just depend what it is that I'm trying to achieve. So that's the two greens. This one looks like Mars black. Let's pretend it is and put some structure in up here. Just sort of indicating where things are not an architectural masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination, but at least acknowledging that it's an actual building. I think the trees have had time to grow up since then. Bit different. Whilst I've got this, I could, because it's just about fine enough to do the trunks on that tree. That one. And we can also turn some of these into buildings too, because that's in fact what they are. A little bit of a flat one there. There's a wall of sorts, and we've got some other indications that these are buildings. Same here. Love this Derwent Lightfast pencil. It's really nice. It's Mars black, and there are two Derwent Lightfast pencils that I've decided I cannot live without at all, and one of them is Forest, which is the green. I used the darker green here, and this is the other one, and that's Mars black. And the reason I like them is they can be anything you need them to be. So Mars black, if you go over the top with white, it'll go purple. I kid you not, it's brilliant. In fact, I can prove it here. Let's go on to here. Just put some Mars black down. And if I go over the top with my favourite Chinese white Derwent drawing pencil, as you can see, it's a dark brown. It's kind of a black, but if you burnish it with white, it becomes purple. And it's stunning in every single incantation. Love it. And nice, rich, dark colour too. We go in there. We can use it on the rock a little bit. That one's quite dark. And maybe as a little bit of texture on the sand. We don't want too much here, just a small amount. I never like to leave a whole area. That's part of my problem. I never like to leave a whole area without doing something to it when you get these really large expanses of space. It's always nice to give it some texture. And one of the things that I'm going to use in a minute is my new Caran d'Ache Neo Art 6901, because it's an oil and wax pastel both at the same time, which is fabulous for textures. In fact, let us find one now. I've got them in a box here. For example, this one is burnt ochre 10%. Brilliant for putting a bit of texture on the rocks on both sides. A little bit on here, on the causeway, a bit on the end of the building. Quite hard to use precisely, but then it's not really a precise instrument. You know, you use it for larger areas. You can also use it for resist techniques. For example, if you wanted to do the sand differently, especially with watercolour, you could put some of this down first and then put the watercolour over the top, and it will resist beautifully. And I've got a couple of videos on here about that, actually. Just trying to find, this is another one. This one is olive brown, 50%. And again, not your usual colour for sand and texture, but it can be used, and you can rub it. The warmth of your finger will spread it a little bit. Just a little bit of interest on the sand. There should be enough interest in the sand for the colours we've got here already, to be fair, because you've got a super granulating watercolour happening over this side. This one has got less because, of course, it's not going to granulate. If it does granulate at all, and some gouaches look like if they might quite like to, but if it's going to granulate at all, then it's going to be different, because it's not really a real thing. It's more of a fluke than anything else. Now, the other thing I want to do quite badly is to knock this bright blue back, because even though it's quite a nice sort of bright blue sea, and that's real, it can happen, in a picture it doesn't always look as good I don't want to make it too dull, but I need to knock some of this out of the sea. So I'm going to use this slate grey Neo Art, and I'm going to then see if I can get a little bit more lighter variation back with my Chinese white pencil. And this, like I said, this is why I love mixed media. Especially with things like watercolour. I used to be so frustrated with my watercolour because I'd get to a point and I'd think, well, I need more from this. This is not right. There's something missing here, or there's something missing there. What else can I possibly do? Nothing, because watercolour and that's it, you're finished. I mean, people use white gouache, they use some people use pencils, quite a lot of people use dip pens or fine liners. So don't write in and say that's not right. You know you can do more with watercolour. Like I said, as a mixed media artist, I don't use any of these mediums correctly. However, I do use them and I get the effects that I want by using them. So it just feels frustrating to me that I would like to do more with something and I felt that I couldn't. For example, here, to put some of our marks on the sand, I'm going to use this acrylic paint pen. It's a fine one and it's not doing very much actually. Let's just see if it's actually still got, oh, there's some, that'll do. Just a little bit of work on the sand. It's not been behaving very well, this one, to be fair, and it's decided today is going to be the day it continues that not behaving very well. Can't actually see anything at all. Let's have a look and see what else I've got in here. Try this Liquitex one, give it a really decent shake, because Liquitex acrylic markers are fabulous. They always say they're opaque, and they're not. They're not as opaque as I want them to be. Maybe that's a me problem and not a product problem, but be aware they're not as opaque as they say. However, they're not too bad, and I like the acrylic, the Liquitex ones, because they're not particularly smooth in their lay down. And I'm quite aware that this is probably not coming out at all on the camera, to be fair. A little bit maybe. We'll see how we go. Yeah, I like the fact that they're not particularly smooth, so you're not going to get a matte, flat result with them. You quite often get a bit of stringiness and a bit of texture, and texture is what it is all about. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my watercolour markers. Here again, you keep on going and finding things that work. I want a bit of shade underneath there so that we can see where the white bits are a bit, because sometimes you get that on the sand. Only want a little bit and then smooth it with a finger. Interesting, it works slightly different on here. You've got to be really quick with your finger as well. Because it's a watercolour marker, you can almost certainly go back in and just smooth it out with a brush as well. It's really, really the smallest touch. Yeah, I'm not even a little bit happy with these bits, and this is why, number one, this is why I like it when mistakes happen on camera, because I can show you what I can do with them. And what I can do next is reach for the gold standard, which is my Neo Pastel. It's an oil pastel, so if I really want a little bit of light, I can pop it in with this. I'm not fussed actually. I think this is okay. I'll hold it up to the camera in a second, and I can go back over some of this at the back here and put some more light back on the water very lightly. Sorry, just make sure I'm actually on camera. That would be good, wouldn't it? And put some light onto here. There's a couple of things to remember here. Number one, watercolour is delicate. Gouache isn't necessarily delicate. So you're not going to get the beautiful transparency with gouache that you can get with watercolour. You get a bit, but it's not going to be exactly the same. And the only way you can tell light bits, which is why the struggle to go through every single white medium I can find, the reason why it's such a struggle is because what's under it is quite light. So you're not going to see it as much. If you were to put some of that onto the really dark parts, like up here and so forth, you'd see it just fine. But it's not necessarily what we're after in this setting. So it's going to be very subtle. And it is actually there. You can, if I hold that up a little bit, you can see that it has sort of given the effect that I'm after. Just a bit of movement on the water, a little bit of froth, that's all it needs to be. This is a quick sketch after all. Right, and this is basically what I wanted to achieve with the quick sketch. So now let's look at the results of our test. We've started out with one substrate and changed it to another. Other than that, everything is very, very similar, as similar as it can possibly be in such a sort of a loose test. As you can see here, it's quite delicate. The watercolor is much more delicate. Yes, the colors are muted, but then don't forget you can control that. I've chosen muted colors for the watercolor, whereas some of the ones here for this, the gouache sample, sorry, can't resist fiddling. Some of the colours for the gouache sample are a lot brighter. Now, I could have chosen a different way of doing that. I could have chosen to mute the colours down or do that slightly differently. These are the usual colours that I choose when I'm doing a gouache, actually. So, you know, it's interesting. This has sort of got a bit more vibrancy in a lot of ways and a bit more sunniness. This one is a little bit more muted. I still prefer the muted colour here, especially on the water. The feel of the two, very, very similar. Absolutely very similar. And as you can see, as I was demonstrating them, they're accepting all the layers without problems. You know, we've used coloured pencil, we've used wax and oil pastels. These are both wax and oil, not to be outdone. These are just oil pastels, and of course you can get wax pastels, but the new Caran d'Ache Neo Arts are both. So we've used that. We've got some acrylic marker, other coloured pencil, other acrylic marker, all sorts in here. And it's accepted absolutely all of it, and it feels wonderful. It feels wonderful to use. I didn't have to work very hard to get a nice saturation of colour with any of these media. And I really do like that, because that's sort of what you're going for. You want something that's easy to use and quite fun, not something that you've got to work quite hard for. So either one would be absolutely fine. I think that my summing up is going to be a classic case of fence sitting. Number one, I like both. I like both in different sort of applications. And I think that my answer is to use both in different parts of the picture. Let me see if I can find some examples here in this sketchbook. This one here, for example, this has got no gouache in it at all. It's all watercolour. And it's got, like I said, quite a lot of delicacy. It's got some ink in the middle, actually. So there was more watercolour, but it's now ink. And as you can see, I let the watercolour stay on the rock so that it granulated and did its thing there. These here, this is what I mean. This is watercolour. Normally I would use pan pastel in that setting. And then watercolour in the background, and then using gouache as you come forward for the more sort of solid and permanent structures. This is another one. Pan pastel, watercolour, more gouaches and so forth, where it's supposed to be a little bit more solid. All of this is coming up in my May roundup next week, so I won't spend a hell of a lot of time on it, but this is another good example whilst we're here. Pan pastel in the background, watercolour in the middle ground, and in the foreground where you want things to be a little bit more solid and real feeling, if you like. There I've used gouache because it is a more solid sort of thing. So again, I'm never going to be a single medium artist anymore. I don't see that happening in this lifetime, to be fair, because now that I've discovered this, it's opened up a whole world and you can do so much with it. So there's no reason why I would kill this off and go back to trying to use one thing at a time. To be honest, I tried it with this, and if you have a look on my Instagram page, you'll see what this one looked like before I added the wildflowers. And it was a perfectly reasonable bird on a rock with a bit of sort of a motley background, and I was so bored I nearly went to sleep painting it. So it took to come back with coloured pencil and acrylic marker and ink and all sorts. There's a few other acrylic markers here. It took all of that to really make it sing, as far as I'm concerned. So do have a look over on Instagram and see what I mean, because I've got the before and after shot on there. And I think you'll realize, you'll agree. Sorry, not realize. I'm sure you can realize. You will agree that it's got a certain something now that it didn't have before. Even though it was a perfectly reasonable picture, it just didn't have any wow factor. So that's why I love it. But to be fair, I think there's a place in the mixed media kit for watercolor and gouache. Like I've said before, and I'll repeat it here again, the reason I've not used my super granulating colors, and in my February sort of art purchase regrets video that's here on YouTube, I actually said that I was thinking about getting rid of them at one point, because I just cover them up. I mean, see here, for example, it's very difficult to see what I've used now. You can see it's paint, and here it's more obviously watercolor on this side, but where it's thicker, it's really, really quite difficult to see. And it always felt like such a shame to have something that's so pretty and so beautiful in its own right, only to lump all this other stuff on top of it. But that's what I do. Lumping is what I do. Put it all on, see what it'll take, throw everything at it. And the result is, I think it's quite nice like this. So, what do you think? What's your opinion? What's your favourite substrate? I'm actually thinking about, for a future watercolour comparison with another one, is to compare watercolours, actual pan watercolours, with watercolour markers like these lovely Albrecht Dürer watercolour ones, and I've got some Winsor and Newton and things like that, because I have noticed a couple of bits and pieces with that as well. And I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag, but I am planning another comparison in the future with those. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you like to use. Have you tried the both? Do you mix them all in the one picture when you're doing mixed media, or is it something that you're now going to go off and have a go at because you hadn't considered that point? I'd love to know your thoughts. Right. So, like I said, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and that helps the channel get seen. And do consider joining my Patreon. Not only do you learn art, and you can see my teaching style, not only do you learn art, but you also help me to create more free and paid stuff, which increases that art for everybody. Thank you so much for your time. I've enjoyed spending this bit of these moments with you. See you again next time. Bye for now. Bye.